We all deal with negative people in our life. That's just a fact of living. But when they're around you on a daily basis, it's so easy for players to adopt these negative attitudes and tendencies. So if you're a parent or if you're a player, how do you deal with this? How can you help your player to avoid picking up these negative attitudes? And really, this idea came from a conversation I had with a player who talked about, how do I deal with negative teammates, and how do I deal with people who are consistent downers? And it makes it really hard for me to really try to grow the team and really try to make everybody better. There's a lot of people who just don't care as much as I do. And, that's something that I definitely related to, because that's something that I had to deal with in my own playing career. There are people who just didn't care as much as I did. And it was a learning process for me. And I'm not going to pretend that I handled it all necessarily the best way that you should handle it. It was definitely something I had to grow and get better at. And I think really by the end of this whole situation, let me back up a little bit. I was in college. I was considered one of the leaders on the team. And I remember after my junior year, I ended up having a conversation with the coach. And essentially, he called me out on me, how I was trying to lead and how I was trying to motivate people. And I felt almost as it was like a personal attack on what I was trying to do. And it ended up kind of withdrawing and what I did the following season, because I just felt like what I was doing wasn't being appreciated and it wasn't being rewarded. But it was really a learning situation for me on how do you deal with players who just don't care as much as, and so if I was in that role, again, talking to this player, I would kind of advise myself to do these three different things. And number one, it's surround yourself with people who share your same values. And if you're a player listening to this and you're the only person on your team who really cares as much as you do, that's really hard, and that's okay. So you may have to go outside of your team situation. One of the conversations I had earlier this week with a player, a pro player, he talked about, he just wasn't just playing club soccer. He would go and play pickup games with different, adults, and at the Y he would go and he would go and play. And I think that's so important, that he kind of surrounded himself with people who were at a higher level, who did care. If you can't do that, necessarily go and find somebody, try to maybe take somebody underneath your wing who maybe who isn't at the same level as you, something that's not going to push you, but they do have that same sort of drive and that same sort of mentality that you share. But throughout my college career, even in my high school career, I was always able to find at least one person who shared that. They may have been better than me, they may have been worse than me, but they were all a good person to train with, who pushed me to be better. And even, I think you can even go outside of your respective sports sometimes when you're training. Like, I always think it's awesome when you see, people on the basketball team and the people on the football team, the people on the soccer team, maybe working out and training together, doing different, agility, speed, SAQ drills to really push themselves. And that's the most important thing. Connect with somebody who's going to push you and share the same value. The second thing I would say and advise that player is, no matter what negative teammates do or say, make sure that you respond in a way that you're not going to regret. I have definitely been at fault for this. I've definitely said words to teammates, acted a certain way to teammates that I would regret. And I'm not going to say that there's any perfect person or any perfect people out there, but there's always a better choice, and there's always a better way to go out, to know how to respond. And you don't have to respond to you don't have to react to every negative word a teammate or even a coach has to say. Like, it's up to you to be able to respond to criticism, whether you like it or not, or whether you think it's valid or not. It's on you to be able to handle that. You can choose the right way to be able to move forward. The main thing is trying to understand, is there a point that they're trying to make underneath the attack? And the third thing I would say is, Remember why you're making the sacrifices that you're trying to make. Remember where you're trying to go. Don't think that wherever you're at is the final step in your journey. One of the things I love talking to about different players is approach players' journeys is understanding that you're not at your final destination. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey and the process to get there. And you need to be able to move forward. So even if you feel like you're at the beginning of your career or you're at the end of your career, you have to be able to see the bigger picture. You got to be able to think long term and understand this situation, this circumstance with these people isn't gonna be the final thing in my career. It kind of leads to one of my favorite quotes, which says, first they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they attack you, then they attack you and want to burn you, and then they build monuments to you. And if you kind of look throughout the history of the world and you look at these different figures, people who disrupted, they were not necessarily always embraced right away. Usually they made quite a few people mad because they wanted to change things. And I really don't want to say that obviously your teammates are going to go that far, but if you see something that's totally different than what everybody else sees, you're not going to always be on the same frequency. And the most important thing is to be able to move forward. Again, your teammates, they may try to ignore you, ridicule you, talk bad about you, attack you, ad hominem attacks, undermine you. But in the end, when they see what you end up moving on to be able to do, or they see how your performance is, then they'll come back and say, oh man, that was, yeah, it was such a treasure and such a pleasure to be able to share this field with you, be on the team. And then they'll talk about how great you were and this and that. In the end, the most important thing is staying consistent and staying on your goals and staying focused on where you want to go. So that's really what I would say to that player. And again, to parents, as you listen to this, hopefully you, number one, encourage your players, just be there and really help them. Because if they can't get it from you, it's going to be very hard when they are getting negative or even just apathetic from you. And then they go to the team and the teammates are being negative. If they know that they can be grounded from listening to you and that you believe in them, that it's such a great feeling, so that then they can go find other people that are reaffirming what it is that you're saying. Let me know if you agree.